Kids are out the door. Time to get to it. We're here today for a little brain fuel. Let's get to it. Gotta get hydrated, gotta get fuel to start the day, and to be able to think clearly. Today, we're gonna be discussing how to play out of position as the pre-flop caller facing a continuation bet. Very, very common spot you will be in if you screw this spot up on a regular basis. Well, you're probably going to have a pretty tough time winning at poker. Before we get started, I was on the cover of Card Player magazine. Look at that. Nice and fancy. Yeah, that's me. Yeah. How fun. You can find that probably in your local casinos. You can also read the article online. I posted the link on Twitter. You can go to twitter.com/JonathanLittle. We have a solid article in here discussing pokercoaching.com. Yeah. Nice. It's always fun to be on the cover of the main poker magazine. Have a full spread, showing off my work. It's good to show off the work every once in a while. So anyway, check that out on Card Player. It's actually the third time I've been on Card Player. Yeah. Here's the most recent one. When was this? This was in 2016. 5 years ago. Here's another one from a long time ago. What a funny picture that was. That was from 2007. I had to go 9 years between the first and the second one. Goodness gracious. Maybe we do have a little bit of longevity in this poker world, huh? Long time ago, my hiking buddy, Hoyt Corkins, told me, you know what, John? There's a lot of poker players who come and go in this game. They tend to last about 10 years at the most. If you can make it more than 10 years in this game, you're doing it right. And it turns out, if you actually look at the poker world, a lot of people don't make it more than 10 years in the poker world as a high-stakes professional. And there are all sorts of reasons for that. Poker's full of potential pitfalls, or some of the people get rich and they quit. But we've been doing it for a long time, at least since since about 2006. So what is that? My brain can't even think that high. We're 15 years, we're doing it. Noisaw says he bought the 2007 issue when they were at Borders way back in the day. It's a lot of fun. All right, today, let's discuss this specific situation as the pre-flop caller out of position when you're facing a bet. So, I'm going to give you a few general blanket rules to help you play these spots reasonably. I'm not going to try to teach you to play the perfect GTO strategy because it's quite difficult. So, first things first, we are going to be discussing very specifically, when there was a pre-flop raise and you call in the big blind. When you call in the small blind, your range is going to be a little bit different. If this was a 3-bet pot, your ranges are going to be a little bit different. We're discussing very specifically when there's a pre-flop raise, you call a big blind, okay? So first things first, you will never have the range advantage from the big blind, meaning you're never going to be a reasonable favorite. You typically want to lead when you have the range and equity advantage, or when you have a sizable nut advantage. And that usually will not be the case. So, as a general rule, you should just not lead. So, you're going to be checking the big blind every single time. There are some exceptions to this, especially as you get really shallow stacked. We're not going to get into that today. But, actually, we'll get into it very briefly. Essentially, whenever you are playing like 20-ish big blinds or shorter, on boards that are really good for your range, you get to lead some portion of the time. And as you get shallower and shallower, as the board gets better and better for you, you should be leading more and more often. Not like 100% of the time, but there will be some spots where you should lead like 50% of the time whenever the board comes all low connected cards. And every once in a while, you'll find that king-high boards are particularly good when you're shallow stacked because the initial raiser does not raise all the king X, but you call all the king X in the big blind. So you have a lot of king X. Those are very, very rare corner cases, though, that are worth discussing, but it's like 0.1% of the flops you're going to be in. So, anyway, from a GTO point of view, when you're playing like 30-ish big blinds or deeper, you really just don't do a lot of leading at all. So, we're not going to do it. A lot of people want to get in their heads that they should try to stringently follow the GTO strategy in all scenarios, and doing that will result in you making errors. I've seen so many people say things like, well, info secures here. There are a few boards where we can lead, like 7 high and lower boards, like I just said, and also the king high boards. But Only when you're playing very shallow stacked, only when your opponent's in specific positions, only when you're well aware of their raises. Is this from the Tournament Masterclass? It is. This is straight from my Tournament Masterclass. Check that out, pokercoaching.com/premium. All right, let's give you some general rules. There's this idea of minimum defense frequency. We discussed this earlier in the Tournament Masterclass. Minimum defense frequency is 1 minus the bet you're facing divided by the bet you're facing plus the total pot size. So essentially, you're going to want to defend with a wider range as you're facing smaller bets and a tighter range as you're facing bigger bets, because when you're facing small bets, you're getting better pot odds. When you're facing a big bet, you're getting worse pot odds, right? That said, it's a very important point. When you are out of position, you are going to realize your equity poorly. Why do I say that? Let's say someone raises, you call with 9-4 suited, okay? Let's say the flop comes Queen Jack 4, giving you bottom pair. This is a spot where you're going to check, your opponent's going to bet. If you call here and they bet again on basically any turn besides a 4 or a 9, you're pretty unhappy, right? And that's going to result in you folding out your equity. So you have some equity with this hand. Your opponent could be bluffing you with Ace 10 or 10-9 or, King 3 of diamonds or whatever nonsense they have. But you're going to end up folding out the best hand a large chunk of the time. So you're not going to realize all of your equity in the spot, which results in you needing to defend tighter than whatever the minimum defense frequency recommends. For example, say in this scenario, your opponent bets the size of the pot, right? So this would be 1 divided by 1 plus 1, which is 50%. 1 minus 50% equals 50%. So logic would say that you need to defend with 50% of your range, but that's not true. Facing a pot size bet from out of position in the big blind, you're going to find that you defend substantially tighter. Okay? That said, every hand that you opt to call with or raise with needs to be able to at least realize its equity based on your pot odds. So pot odds and minimum defense frequency are different. Very different. For example, what I mean, say your opponent pots the flop, right? We just figured out you need minimum defense frequency is 50% of your range, but all of those hands you continue with only need 33% equity because your pot odds are 1 divided by the entire amount you can get out of the pot, which is your bet, your opponent's bet, and the pot before that, right? So that's 1 divided by 3, which equals 33%. So minimum defense frequency says 50%. Of the time you need to defend. Like I said, you're going to want to defend less than that. But every hand you defend with needs to realize at least 33% equity. Okay? Realize minimum defense frequency and pot odds are 2 very different things. Okay. Let's take a look at a common flop scenario. So in this scenario, there's a bet and it folds around to us, right? Or we're heads up, which is a much simpler scenario. We need to generalize a few of these things. There are 4 main factors you're going to want to be thinking about when you're playing in these scenarios, and that is the type of hand that you have, premium made hand, draw, marginal made hand, or junk, the nut advantage, who has more absolute premium hands, the stack depth, because that's going to dictate which draws you opt to raise with, and if you even need to raise with your value hands, and your position. So let's discuss each of these very briefly before we get into some examples. So, very simply, your hand type. Whenever you have nothing, fold. Easy. You're going to find that whatever bluffs you want to be bluffing with from a GTO point of view are going to come from your draws. Now, sometimes they're going to come from really junky looking draws, like 2 overcards with a backdoor flush draw, or a gut shot straight draw, right? They may come from pretty bad draws, or maybe even stuff like king high every once in a while. But whatever draws you have are usually going to have some amount of equity. With your marginal made hands, you're going to find that for the most part, you want to call. Now, there are going to be exceptions to this. Everybody always wants to try to harp on the exceptions. They say, oh, there are exceptions, therefore you're wrong. Everybody wants to try to prove everybody else wrong for some reason. I realize there are exceptions. We actually go through them in the tournament course. But, in general, with your marginal made hands, you want to be calling. And with your premium hands and some of your draws, you're going to either want to call or raise, usually based on the nut advantage. So, let's talk about the nut advantage. Here we are. Who has more super premium hands? If you have the nut advantage, you're going to find that you want to raise more and more often with your draws and your marginal, your draws and your premium made hands. And if you do not have the nut advantage, you want to do a whole lot of calling. Very clear example of this. Say it comes 5-4-4, right? You have a lot of 4s in your range. Your opponent has almost none. That's a spot where you're going to want to check raise a ton, with a lot of your continuing range, because you have a big nut advantage, because you have ace 4, king 4, queen 4, jack 4, right? You have all sorts of 4s, whereas the pre-flop raiser does not, right? So even though they have the range advantage, you have the nut advantage, which is going to lead to you raising on a lot of flops. If you don't have the range advantage, say it comes ace, king, jack, that's the spot where the initial raisers have lots of nut hands and you don't really. You have a lot of marginal hands. In that scenario, when you do happen to have the queen 10 or the king jack for 2 pair, you have to do a lot of calling in that scenario. Also, in terms of raise sizing, you're going to find you usually want to go about 2.5x the previous bet when you're in position, but we're talking about out of position today. So usually you're going to find you want to go about 3x. There again are exceptions. As you get shallower and shallower, you should raise smaller. Okay? Now let's discuss stack depth. Okay? Deeper stacked. You're going to want to be calling more with hands that have bigger implied odds. That's going to allow you to check call with some floats, essentially. Hands that have not a ton of showdown value, but have decent equity. Also, whenever you raise, when you're deeper stacked, you're going to be raising larger. When you're shallower stacked, implied odds hands go down in value, and when you raise, you want to raise smaller, unless you're opting to use the big all-in raise. Also, you're going to find that the draws you opt to raise with are different based on stack depth. I'm not sure if we're going to have time to look at that today, but maybe we will. Finally, position. We're going to be discussing out of position today. And from out of position, you typically want to be more inclined to raise in general, okay, due to having a difficult time playing your weak draws on the turn when you fail to improve. For example, say you're in position and your opponent bets and you call with some gut shot straight draw. If they check the turn, you get to bet and pick up the pot a lot of the time, right? But if you're out of position, if it goes check, check on the turn and you bet the river, they can just easily call with all bluff catchers, and it makes your life pretty difficult. So anyway, here we have a flow chart. There are a lot of flow charts in this tournament masterclass that I have at pokercoaching.com/premium. And essentially, what you want to do is you want to look at this and figure out your hand type first. Do we have junk? If we have junk, just fold. Nice and easy. Do we have a marginal hand? If we have a marginal hand, we call. Nice and easy. Do we have a premium hand or a draw? Next, you want to ask, do we have the nut advantage? If we do not, we do a lot of calling. If we do, we do a lot of raising. Okay? All right. No, it's a lot to take in here. But that's that. See, all of you have some questions. How good was Doug's fold against Phil Hellmuth? Actually, probably pretty good. We have a video coming out about that very soon on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe, youtube.com/pokercoaching. If you're watching on YouTube, click the like, subscribe, and notification bell. I know that almost no one clicks the notification bell. So click the notification bell, please. Nut advantage depends on how often you have 2 pairs, sets, straights, etc. in your range. Yeah, that's exactly right. The nut advantage, does that mean you have the nuts / can draw the nuts, or it means your range has more of a chance of having the nuts? Very clearly, nut advantage. We discussed this thoroughly in the tournament course. It's right at the beginning because it's very important. But essentially, you want to look at your range and ask, do I have a lot of realistic nut combinations in my range compared to the nuts in my opponent's range? For example, they raise under the gun on ace, king, jack, and you call the big blind. Yeah, you have queen 10, but they have queen 10 too, especially queen 10 suited. And they also have pocket aces, pocket kings, pocket jacks, ace, king, ace, jack, right? They have all the premium hands. And when I say nuts, I don't mean the actual literal queen 10 nuts. I mean hands that are very premium and happy to get all their money in. Like pocket aces on ace, king, jack is not folding, right? Pocket jacks on ace, king, jack is not folding. Okay, so take a board like 9-4-4. If under the gun raises and the big blind calls on 9-4-4, yeah, under the gun has ace 4 and pocket nines, but big blind has ace 4, king 4, queen 4, jack 4, 5-4, 4-3, and they have a lot of 4s, right? So that is what we mean by nut advantage. In that scenario, the big blind is going to be check raising a lot of the time on that 9-4-4 board, whereas they basically never check raise on ace, king, jack. Okay. Now we're talking about out of position. That's correct. What about raising first in from out of position? That's not what we're talking about today, Peter. If you want to go through any other spot you can imagine, check out the tournament masterclass at pokercoaching.com, okay? If we go through every single spot, that will take me about 30 hours. The entire tournament masterclass is about 30 hours long. I only have about 30 more minutes, so we're not going to go through every spot here. If you want to go through the rest of this, make sure you check out the tournament masterclass. Okay. Ace Jack 5. We're going to be discussing very specifically right now 40 big blinds deep. Is this for a tournament or live? This is for any scenario where you're playing 40 big blinds deep. Cash game, tournament, whatever. We can look at ranges if we're playing deeper stacked if we feel inclined, but we're discussing this specific scenario because this scenario comes up a lot. These strategies will roughly apply to when you're playing 30 big blinds deep, 60 big blinds deep, a wide range of medium stack scenarios. We also go through shallower stack play in the Tournament Masterclass too. If we have time today, we'll get to that, but I don't think we will because a lot of you keep trying to sidetrack me. All right, I'll do my best to keep us in line. Okay, we have the range analyzer that I use at pokercoaching.com. Look at this. I changed the background and it messed this up. Ugly, ugly, ugly. We're going to have to fix this. All right. The way we read this. Okay, so first off, let me line up the scenario. Under the gun +1 raises, we call from the big blind. Okay? Flop comes ace, jack, 5. You check, under the gun bet 67% pot. Okay? You must proceed cautiously in this scenario due to lacking the range advantage. Let me actually, I'm losing my mind with this. Give me just 1 second. We are going to attempt to change the background. You think it'll let me do it? Choose image. You think it'll let me do it? I don't think it's going to let me do it. Let's see. I want the PowerPoint slide background. Let's see if this will do this. Did it do it? Beautiful. Okay. I'll go back and make this pretty later. Now we wasted another minute, everybody. Can you believe this? I hope you can tell by the wildly high quality of this show that YouTube's paying me big bucks to be here today. Okay. Now I completely screwed it up. Amazing content quality. Is this YouTube paying me for this? Yeah, exactly. Okay. Here, we're in this scenario where we're actually going to be folding a lot. I don't know why I can't get this image to become the right size. Because why would it now that I want it to become the right size? Why would it? There it goes. Okay, close enough. Okay. Let's take a look at this. This is a poker coaching range analyzer. If you've never seen it, it's going to be unfamiliar to you, but let me briefly help you with this. It comes ace, jack, 5. This is a spot where we're facing a big bet, 67% pot. Also, we don't really have much of a range and or nut advantage here. So let's go through and classify our hands. Premium made hands that we're happy getting all of our money in with, draws, marginal made hands, and junk. Okay, so let's just go through and write down, enter in the premium hands. Premium hands here are going to be 2 pair and better, right? So we have ace jack, ace 5, jack 5 suited, pocket 5s. You may say, why are some of these hands in white? Because these hands get 3-bet before the flop or folded before the flop. We are not trying to use a complicated mixed strategy. I'm going to show you that in just a second if we're using the straight GTO strategy. But I'm not trying to teach you to play like a solver because I know from talking to thousands of students that humans are really bad at doing this and they're actually pretty good at doing this. Turns out if you teach people how to play in an implementable strategy that's close enough to GTO, you are going to, well, play way better than your opponents. All right, so let's classify the hands. We have the hands in red. What are the draws on ace, jack, 5, 2 spades? This is actually a tough one because we don't actually get to have a lot of draws here. If we even want to have draws. We may not even want to have many draws. But from out of position, you're going to find you do want to check raise your best hands. So when you are check raising in this spot, you get to have a few more draws than you do premium made hands. Up to perhaps a 2-to-1 ratio. 2 draws to 1 premium hand. That said, that's when you're usually a little bit deeper stacked. As we're shallower, that number gets closer to a 1-to-1 ratio. And that's why we have in this scenario, we're raising 4% of the hands as a draw, raising 3.3% of hands for value. And typically you're going to find the draws that want to raise are the worst flush draws that lack showdown value. These are pretty good hands to opt to raise. And then we're calling with the higher ones because the higher ones have a little bit more equity. You don't really want to check raise a hand like a high flush draw and then have to fold it to an all-in. If you do check raise a hand like 7-3 of spades, by the way, you are folding this to an all-in. Okay? What bothers you about micro stakes is they don't take ranges into account. That's fine. You still need to learn how to play fundamentally sound so that you can adjust to whatever they do incorrectly. All right. What hands are marginal? Marginal hands are going to be king highs, some good king highs and better, pretty much. So here we have king, queen with a spade, classified as marginal, or a backdoor heart draw. We have all of these flush draws that have pretty good equity. We have all these pairs, all the aces, all the fives, all the jacks. This all seems reasonable, right? Then we have under pairs listed as junk. You may say, why would we continue with 7-5 but not pocket tens? Well, because 7-5 has a few more outs, right? So this is what roughly what we're doing. Notice we're not defending anywhere near minimum defense frequency. We're folding 56%. And I think this is a pretty nice strategy. Let's take a look at what GTO does. Notice, very important, you want to make sure whatever strategy you are using actually does kind of line up with GTO. It's not always going to be perfectly lined up with it. But ideally, your raise percentage is roughly the same as the GTO solver's raise percentage. And you want your calling range to be roughly the same as the GTO calling range, your folding range to be roughly the same as the GTO calling range. Here we have 736.57. GTO range is 922.68. So GTO solver actually folds a little bit more than I was even folding. And you may say, is that okay? I think the answer is yes. GTO solver assumes the opponent is playing perfectly. Okay? And I can tell you, the opponent is not going to be playing perfectly. Okay? So in this scenario, let's take a look at what the solver does. Solver raises its best hands like ace-jack, jack-5, ace-5 sometimes. Notice the solver uses a very mixed strategies. The hands in red, by the way, are raised. Greens are called, blues are fold, grays are folded or re-raised before the flop. Again, we are trying to use implementable strategies because humans are way better at that than figuring out that they need to raise the king 4 suited X small percentage of the time. And you see the solver continues with, actually, solver even folds out 5s immediately. Remember how we discussed equity realization? This is a spot where you actually do just have to fold a ton because your opponent has a whole lot of aces and a whole lot of jacks. That said, I do think you can call wider than GTO recommends in this spot because, again, your opponents are not going to play perfectly. GTO strategy assumes your opponents are going to play perfectly, which they are not, right? So this is a spot where we are raising about as much as the solver, calling a little bit more, folding a little bit less, but I think that's fine. You do want to look at the hands that the solver does opt to continue with. You're going to find that solver usually likes, solver usually does not like stuff like underpairs with with just 2 outs. Solver really, really hates those. So you should probably be folding those in spots like this. Notice if, well, I guess you can't see, but if we had kings or queens, we would not be folding those because those beat the jacks, right? Kind of interesting to see solver actually even folds out some jacks immediately, which is really, really nitty. I'm never folding out a jack here. Also worth noting, which draws does the solver opt to raise? It's raising most of the low flush draws and a few of the best flush draws, right? That is relevant. Okay. And when you raise a good flush draw, you're not folding it. When you raise a bad flush draw, you are folding it. Let's now discuss a different scenario. Similar, but very different. Now we are in the big blind against the button 33% pot bet. So now we're against the button who raised pre-flop. Button's going to have a much, much wider range than the under the gun player, right? So therefore, we are not going to be folding quite as often to the button. And also button's using a smaller bet size, which also is going to lead us to not folding quite as often. However, notice the button still has a big, big, big nut advantage here. Because look at our re-raising range. All these hands in white up at the top, all these hands are re-raised before the flop. And if we don't have aces, ace king, ace queen, ace jack, ace 10 here, we actually don't have very many premium hands. So let's go through, classify our hands again. Here is something else you're going to find the solver does. I discussed this in the tournament masterclass. But it usually takes your best top pairs and raises them kind of no matter what they are. So like right here, you see we have ace 9 raising, which I think is fine. If we did not raise ace 9 here, by the way, we'd have to raise fewer draws. And 40 big blinds deep, solver thinks ace 9 is good enough to just get it in. Is it good enough to get in? I don't know. I don't know in reality. You may find this is a spot you don't want to have a raising range at all. If you told me you wanted no raising range, I wouldn't hate it. That said, it's important to note that like ace 9 in this scenario beats all the weak aces, which your opponent has. It also beats all the jacks, well, all the good jacks, which your opponent has, and it beats the underpair. So ace 9 is actually in pretty good shape. Also, whenever you have an ace in your hand, you block your opponents from having an ace as well. So it's more likely it's just the best hand and you want to push equity. Okay? In this scenario, again, we just categorize the draws. We throw in about 1.2, 1.5 to 1. Notice here we have some draws down here, some really junky draws are raising as a bluff, like 4-3, whereas a hand like King 10 is not raising. You may say, why would you raise 4-3 but not king 10? Because king 10 is actually the best hand a lot of the time, and you don't need to raise king 10 because it can win at the showdown realistically. Whereas 4-3 can never win at the showdown unless it improves, right? Middle pocket pairs aren't junk. They are good enough to raise. You didn't raise, so you don't have pocket pairs. Sean, before the flop, going back to this slide here, against an under-the-gun raiser, you do not want to re-raise the middle pocket pairs. As you see here, solver does not raise the middle pocket pairs pre-flop against an under-the-gun raise. That would be a big, big, big error. If you mess up before the flop, you're going to make gigantic blunders post-flop. When under-the-gun raises, you do not 3-bet small and medium pairs. It is a disaster. Okay? That said, here we are against the button. We do 3-bet wider with the pairs. So as you see now, 5s are no longer in our range, right? Whereas 4s and 2s are. We 3-bet the 3s. Again, you can get the downloadable, implementable pre-flop charts at pokercoaching.com. All of that is right there. Do we never slow play 2-pair from the big blind at this stack depth? Do we check raise? Always. Yeah. So look, again, if we go back to the previous scenario, you'll see the solver mixes, right? It basically always check raises ace jack. It always check raises ace 5. It mixes with ace 5. Jack 5. And it mixes with ace 5. But do you want to make your life easy? Again, it goes back to, are you trying to play like a GTO robot that check raises the ace 5 suited 18% of the time? Or are you trying to play a strategy that is very implementable? Implementable strategies are not going to be quite as profitable as the perfect GTO strategy, but you can't play the perfect GTO strategy, so find the next best thing. Okay? So anyway, here we are in this scenario. This is roughly the implementable strategy. Here we're not folding any pairs now, right? Let's take a look at what the solver does. Solver now, let's take a look at our percentages. So solver raises 13, calls 37. We raise 7, call 40, so we're raising a little bit less than solver here. Solver's pretty aggressive with weak top pairs, just getting it in. Well, say weak top pairs. Ace 10, which we actually don't have in our range due to it being 3-bet. Ace 8, it opts to raise. And then solver raises a smattering of bluff. Something else solver does that is worth noting is it'll often take hands like bottom pair, bad kicker, and raise them. Like we see the 5-4 and the 5-3 and the 4-3. Something us humans also have a difficult time with. You're going to find that people typically just don't raise often enough in this spot, myself included, all people included. It's hard to raise often enough in these scenarios where it's clear you're raising into a decently strong range. But we do see the gut shots are raised basically every time. That is an important takeaway. We see king 10 is basically never raised, also an important takeaway, right? As your draw lacks showdown value, you should typically be more inclined to raise it, especially when you're raising very, very polarized. Okay? Also kind of interesting that flush draws don't always raise. They do a lot of mixing. So anyway, neat stuff. Then in the Tournament Masterclass, I go through this scenario where we're on the button against under the gun, but we're not going to go through that spot today. All right, let's take a look at now King 6. All right. I realize a lot of people keep asking me to give various other examples. What about if you're deep stack? What about if you're multi-way? What about if you're playing 82 big blinds deep? What about if you're playing 15 big blinds deep? We have a whopping 15 more minutes in the show today. We cannot go through all these scenarios. That's why I made the Tournament Masterclass for you. Check it out, pokercoaching.com/premium. All right. Here's another spot we're going to be folding a lot. Okay? Here's another spot we're going to be folding a lot. That said, we are still going to want to raise with our best hands and some draws. What are draws on King 6? Well, if you think about it, there aren't any obvious ones. But the draws that you're going to want to raise typically are going to be around the trips or the other pair. So we see like 8-7 with a backdoor flush draw opting to raise. 9-8 with a backdoor flush draw opting to raise, right? All the queen jacks opting to raise. I think this is a pretty reasonable strategy. Notice your check raising range is well protected by all the kings, right? So notice we're raising really, really polarized. When you have a king, it's a super nuts. You're very, very happy about this. Then we're going to be calling with good ace highs and better. All the pairs, right? That all makes sense. And folding everything else, right? I think that all makes good logical sense. Here we're raising 13, calling 28, folding 57, 12, 24, 62. Looks nice, right? So what does the solver do in this scenario? Again, do you want to be implementable or do you want to be the straight GTO strategy? Good luck finding your calls slash raises slash folds with the queen jack offsuit. Maybe you can do it, maybe not. Notice the queen 7 suited raises every once in a while, whereas I was just opting to fold it. Same with queen 8 suited, right? We're trying to be implementable here. We're essentially taking all these queen 7s and putting them in the queen jack offsuit range, right? And doing that's going to make your life very, very easy, and you're not losing much equity. It's important to realize that every time you do something different than GTO, you lose some amount of equity compared to GTO. But everything I'm telling you here loses you almost no equity. And if you can lose almost no equity and play like the GTO robot, you might as well, right? So anyway, I was opting to raise most of the kings. You may say, why would we not raise king 6? Because it's a super nuts, same thing with pocket 6s. Solver actually does not raise all the kings, which is interesting to note. It does not raise the low kings, which is, makes sense. You want to protect your calling range. Solver raises pocket 2s as a bluff. That's something else that Solver randomly will do, where it'll randomly raise the low pairs, which is fun. Also very difficult for us humans to implement. If I was to edit this image a little bit, I want to make it clear. I actually made all of these implementable images before I looked at the solver. So I did not know what the solver was doing in these scenarios when I made these. This is just what I've learned from going through many, many iterations of this, right? This shows you that us mere humans can come up with roughly the GTO range, roughly the GTO strategy, without actually knowing what it is, by following a system and patterns that I teach you. It's going to sound bad, but if you look at a lot of the other training courses, training sites out there, they all say, here's what you do on King, King 6. Go do it. And then they leave you to do your own thing. And I do not think that's a good way to teach people to do anything. And I actually know it's not, because I've had basically no students who could do that, myself included. I cannot memorize this chart and implement it. Just like I can't memorize this chart, which is similar but slightly different, and implement it. And this chart, which is similar but slightly different, and implement it. It's a big pain. But I can remember some rules. I can remember a set of 10 rules in a flow chart and come up with roughly the right play. And that is what I teach all of you to do at pokercoaching.com. And I show you the GTO strategy too if you're a super genius. Maybe you're a super genius. If you are, congratulations. All right. So this is roughly what Solver does. Like I said, I'm telling you, it's like roughly what the JL strategy is. One thing worth noting, King 6 and Pocket 6s do slow play every time. Whenever you have the super duper nuts that's not really concerned with being outdrawn, you don't do much raising at all. You do a whole lot of calling. Okay? What about when we are against the button? Now we're against a wider range. You're going to find this is going to result in us raising a little bit more often. Also, we have all the King X in our range here. All of it. Okay? We have all the King X, which is quite nice. It means we get to raise this spot very aggressively. Okay? So given we get to raise very aggressively, we get to raise with more and more draws. Again, the draws here are just going to wrap around the king and the 6 or have some sort of backdoor flush draw. Okay? I'm raising a lot here. Call it 25%, calling 23, folding 51, 51, 20, 28. Again, numbers are pretty nice. You just want to make sure you're not doing anything very different than the solver is doing. Notice solver raises most of the kings here. And just a smattering of bluffs, right? So there you go. Nice and easy. All right, what about Queen 10-5, all spades? Okay. So now, under the gun +1 raises, big blind calls, Queen 10-5, all spades. We check, they bet a third pot. We discuss how to play as the pre-flop raiser, obviously, earlier in this tournament course. Now, we, again, don't get to do a ton of raising here because we are raising into a range that contains a lot of premium flushes. It's important to note here that the under the gun +1 range does not have all of the flushes like the big blind does, as we see here, but it contains a pretty solid proportion of flushes, right? Like it has all the nut flushes, lots of good king high flushes, lots of good queen high flushes. And notice those actually kind of beat our flushes, which is not particularly great. As Natty says, make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button and the notification bell if you like this. If you don't like this, go do something else with your life. It will not offend me. All right. Queen 10-5, all spades. What are we doing? What are our best hands in our draws? Our best hands are going to be flushes, 2 pairs, sets. Is top pair good enough? Maybe. Maybe top pair is good enough. Zara says, what's our hand? We don't know what our hand is. We're playing our whole range. It's important to understand when you're studying poker, you don't ask, how do I play my hand? You want to ask how I play my range. So in this scenario, by studying a chart like this, we study everything we can have in our range. All of it. Instead of studying one little hand. By studying one little hand, you're essentially wasting your time when you could study all of the hands. So in this scenario, what is our hand? If we have Jack 6 of spades, let's say, we're probably going to raise. You're going to find the lower flushes want to raise here, and the better flushes typically want to call. You may say, why would we call with the nut flushes and king-eye flushes? Aren't we worried about getting outdrawn with the king-eye flush draw, with the king-eye flushes? And the answer is, like, not really. Your opponent's drawing thin to dead in those spots. Why would we raise the lower flushes? Because if your opponent has a random Jack of spades, they're drawing live, right? So this is a spot where we are raising with our weaker flushes, which are just the super nuts. We're getting our money in. Then we're raising with sets and 2 pairs, right? Let's take a look at what solver does. Oh, in terms of calling here, it gets kind of gross. I'm calling with all the pairs, but this could easily be a spot where you want to fold the pairs too. Like I would not be shocked if the solver actually folds more than 49% here. Oh no, it doesn't. It doesn't. Folds a little bit less. All right, cool. Solver's calling with like all these high flushes. Flush draws is what it's doing, I suppose, right? So solver's strategy is a bit of a mess here. Let's try to figure this out. Solver raises 2 pairs, like we said. It's picking Jack 9 and King Jack to bluff sporadically, which we had those in our bluffs as well, which is good. It's folding out some pairs. I think I had all these as listed as calls, didn't I? Yeah. So why am I folding so often? Where are my folds coming from that the solver does not have? Let's put some of these down here. No, we have all those listed too. I guess our ranges are close enough anyway, so we probably are doing roughly this. It's just difficult to see because on our chart, like right here with King 6, by the way, so King 6 of spades, this is actually 3/4 of a fold, right? So that makes sense, right? A King 6 looks like a fold, even though on my chart it looks like a call, even though I know it's not. So this makes sense. Let's take a look at the draw, the flushes the solver opts to raise. Solver opts to mix it up with the flushes. Mostly calling the best flushes, right? Mostly calling the best flushes, mostly raising. Yeah, it's a mix. Solver mixes up this kind of thing, right? Solver does raise a lot of this ace of spades X that lacks showdown value. Also, again, you're going to find the draws very often. Like, take a look at ace jack, right? Ace of spades jack mostly calls, right? And that's because if you raise it and get jammed, you don't really love it. You rather just call and try to get there and you win at the showdown sometimes. Why give away free information? Because why not? I like helping people who want to improve their skills. It's important to note that I was not a good poker player when I started. People were willing to help me. People still help me. And I am happy to share all the knowledge that people share with me with all of you. Also, I have a training site, pokercoaching.com. This is just a tiny piece of my tournament masterclass. It's about 30 hours long, plus about 20 hours of hand history reviews, where I go through all of my wins over the last few months. And maybe if you enjoy this, maybe you'll go sign up. Check it out, pokercoaching.com/free. All right. Here we have big blind versus button, queen 10-5, roughly the same thing. Yeah, not a lot of raising here, but again, a little bit of raising. Let's take a look at Jack 6-2, okay? We're going to move a little bit quick so I can get through a few of these spots, otherwise we're going to run out of time soon. Jack 6-2. Undergun +1 raises, we call from the big blind. If you have not checked out Brain Fuel, by the way, check it out. I know a lot of you have already tried it out and you're loving it. I'm telling you. This is not like a regular energy drink. This is sustained fuel for all day. You drink this thing, you'll probably, unless you're on 12 cups of coffee a day, you'll probably be good all day. And it's healthy. Check it out, Poker Coaching, or check it out at brainfuel.com and use code POKERCOACHING for 15% off. Oh my goodness, it's changed my coffee intake, that's for sure. All right, in this scenario, go through classify your hands, nice and easy. How many milligrams of natural caffeine? It's all the caffeine that's in here. We are looking at, where does it say it? I saw it earlier. 360, I think. Someone listed it. I don't know, I'm not gonna go through and read the label. 360, I think, a solid amount. That said, it's not just a caffeine drink. A lot of energy drinks are all the caffeine and like nothing else. This is MCT oil, collagen, vitamin E, vitamin C, zinc, glycine, all sorts of good stuff. Is it only in the States? Not as far as I know. Go to brainfuel.com, check it out. All right, classify your hands. Classify your hands. This is very important. Every time you're in a scenario, go to the Poker Coaching Range Analyzer and classify your hands. Okay? And if you do not do this, you are not going to be able to succeed at poker long term. How many grams of sugar? 5. Is 5 a lot? I don't think 5's a lot. 5's a little bit. This is all logical, right? On Jack 6-2, you're not folding pairs. I could be convinced that you should raise more draws here. That said, if you look at our premium hands that are raising, we don't really get a whole lot of room for draws, right? Notice we're already at 6%, whereas we're already at 8% draws just raising these. Notice we have King Queen listed as a draw. You're going to find that 2 overcards is usually like really, really good. I like that a lot. Overcards are backdoor flush draws, which are good. I would love to raise the King 5 suited here. We just don't have room, right? There's just not enough room in our range unless we wanted to be out of line. Let's see what solver does. Solver generally agrees. Can't really raise the low King X, Queen X, etc. Notice solver does pick the King Queen a lot to raise. You may say, how does Jonathan Little know to raise the King Queen without looking at the solver? Well, you got to look at the solver, follow the patterns, and you have to study ahead of time, right? Like I said, I made this image before I looked at this solver range, and it lines up close enough, right? We have 13, 39, 47, 21, 33, 45. So, I mean, it's very close, right? Very close strategy. And this is going through this process over and over and over and over and over again is going to help you learn how to think like the solver. Something I learned in this process of going through the solver scenarios was that bottom pair gets raised some portion of the time in a lot of these spots where you don't really have a lot of logical draws. So notice like 6-4 raises a lot here. 6-5 raises a lot here. Okay? Are we concerned with reverse implied odds with King Queen when they have King Queen or Queen Jack and we get there? No, not really. When you make top pair 40 big blinds deep, you're very happy with your hand. Big blind versus button, same thing. Go through classify the hands. Whenever you are big blind versus button, you're going to check raise a little bit wider in most scenarios. Is that a pattern you've all been picking up? I hope so. You've been paying attention, looking at patterns and correlating them. You're going to find that in the previous hand, for example, you don't get to raise. You get to raise a little bit wider is what it amounts to because you're against a wider range, right? Notice here you get to raise with a wider range of value hands, which allows you to raise with a wider range of draws, right? Notice here we were raising 8% of draws when we were under the gun, or big blind against under the gun +1. When we're against the button, you see now we're raising 14% of draws, a whole lot more draws because we're against a substantially wider range. And now we get to expand our range to contain these Queen X and King X with 1 overcard, right? Those are the next most obvious draws. Why does bottom pair raise? Essentially as a draw / value bet to some extent. What about Jack 6-6? Ooh, we finally got to a fun one. All this time we haven't been having any fun, but now we got to a fun one. All right, Jack 6-6. Under gun +1 raises, we call from the big blind. Jack 6-6, we check, they bet a third. You may find that in the real world, people bet smaller than a third. This is a spot where a lot of people bet 1 big blind, which is good. You should. We want to raise all of our 6s, at least in most of our 6s. We want to raise our ace-jack, best top pairs. Calling with a lot of ace-high and middle pairs. We could also slow play sometimes, like Jack 6, etc. I would not be shocked if like ace-6 wants to slow play here sometimes. Like, sure. I wouldn't be shocked if the low 6s call sometimes. Like, sure. That said, I think this looks pretty nice. Notice we have a big nut advantage here, which allows us to bluff with a lot of bluffs. And I want you to actually sit here and ask yourself, would you check raise Queen 7 of hearts on Jack 6-6? Think about it in your heart of hearts. Would you actually make this play? Type it in the comments. Type it in the chat box. Would you actually check raise Queen 7 of hearts on Jack 6-6? You're going to find that the vast majority of players do not. What can I help you with?
The link isn't working. I can't download the files.
I'll figure it out for you. Do you need to write this second?
Can you just airdrop the videos to me?
One second, everyone.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I was going to take the phone by myself.
It's okay, sweet pea. All right. Should be coming.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, you would check raise the Queen 7, but at a very low frequency. Everyone says, hi, Amy. Hi, Amy. Nobody can see you. You're hiding outside the door. Did you get him? Okay. Most people do not. I agree. Most people do not. And that's a mistake. Are there 2 hearts on the Jack 6-6? Yes. Jack of spades, Jack of hearts, 6 of clubs. As we see, solver here, check raises the Queen 7 a lot. It check raises the Queen 8 a lot. The Queen 9 backdoor draws every time. Every time. Right? Queen 10 backdoor draws pretty much every time. King Queen, a lot. Right? Solver is check raising a lot in this scenario. Why is it check raising so much? Because you have all the 6s. I mean, take a look at this. Pretty much all the 6s are raising, right? Some of them call sometimes, like we see A6 call sometimes, which I said probably makes sense. 10-6 and 9-6 randomly, right? So you see that the solver's check raising all the 6s, which, if you look right here, is about 10% of your range, which allows you to check raise with many, 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 many draws. And here you have a big nut advantage, like we discussed at the top of the show. When you have the big nut advantage, you're supposed to be check raising a ton. So get in there and blast them. There's nothing they can do about it because you have all the nuts and they don't. Okay? Also notice what the calling range looks like. Calling range is mostly jacks, mostly ace highs, mostly pairs, right? There is a little bit of slow playing. A lot of people look at this scenario and think, oh, but if you never have a 6, then they can just triple off against you. Well, we have some 6s, right? You want to make sure you're slow playing some. Do we check raise all in? Oh, no, 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 no. Whenever we're playing 40 big blinds deep, they raise to 2 big blinds pre-flop, we call. The pot's only 6-ish or so big blinds. We're going to check. They're going to bet 1 or 2. We're going to check raise to about 5. We discussed this. You're check raising to about 3 to 2.5x the opponent's bet. We discussed that at the top of the show as well. When we check raise, we're check raising small. You're not check raising gigantic. That is a blunder. You're going to find that in scenarios like this, especially when you have the big nut advantage, you want to be check raising small because your opponent's just screwed. Against your check raising range, you either have the nuts or you have a draw. And against that range, you are in terrible shape. If they re-raise, do we fold? Depends on your hand, obviously. If you have a 6 for trips, you don't fold. I would hope that's common sense. If you flop 3 of a kind and no limit Texas style, the Cadillac of poker, you do not fold when you get shoved all in for 40 big blinds. Hate to break it to you, you don't fold the trips. If you have Queen 8 of hearts for Queen high, and they shove you all in, you fold because you have the Queen high. Queen high in the Cadillac of poker is not a very good hand. Queen high is not very good. Trips are very good. That's the power in using a polarized strategy, is your life is super easy. What a lot of people do wrong here is they check raise, take a hand like Jack 4 for top pair bad kicker. They check raise top pair bad kicker, then they get re-raised and they don't know what to do, which is a blunder. You do not want to be in that spot because you took a hand that has a lot of equity and you threw it in the garbage. Don't do that. All right, let's skip forward. We have a few more spots we're going to try to get through very, very, very quickly because I have something else happening very soon. Yeah, this is Kel. You pretty much summed up no limit hold'em. Queen high is bad. Trips are good. Don't fold good hands. Fold the bad hands. Okay? You meant that if we raise with Queen 7, what do we fold? If you check raise with Queen 7 on Jack 4-4 and they shove you all in, you fold. I don't know why this is difficult. When you have nothing and they want to go all in, you fold. When you have something very good and they want to go all in, you don't fold. Okay? I want to make it really crystal clear here. Look at this strategy we're check raising. We're check raising 6s for trips. They're in red, very clearly in red. This is the beauty of the range analyzer. It makes it really clear what you're doing. This is actually miscategorized. My bad. Let's take a look at this one. Check raise all of these hands in red. And we're check raising all these hands in blue. All these hands in blue are garbage. They're all garbage. Every hand in blue is garbage. Every hand in red is the nuts. Okay? You check raise all the nuts, you check raise a bunch of garbage, and then your life is easy. That is called using a polarized strategy. All right, let's take a look at 975. Also, very good spot for the big blind. Same story against under the gun. You can't get too out of line with aggressive raises. A lot of people think on this 975 board you want to be super insane and check raise a lot, but not really against under the gun when they 2/3 pot it. Against under the gun 2/3 pot, it's very important to note, this presumes the opponent's using the GTO strategy. If your opponent is not using the GTO strategy and continuation betting 100%, as a lot of bad players do, you can check raise a ton. But if they're using the GTO strategy, they actually are not betting all that often with this 975 board. So when they bet, especially using 2/3 pot size, they're going to be pretty polarized. Against a pretty polarized range, you, in turn, don't get to raise very often, which is why we see this strategy, right? We could maybe get away with raising a few more draws, some of the 8s. Sure, just like me looking at this naturally. We see we check raise 13, call 50. So, wow, solver raises even less, which is kind of surprising to me. But I'm telling you why it's doing this, why this may be a little bit shocking to you. It's because, well, shocking to me at least, it's because we are against the strong under the gun range that's also betting with a polarized strategy. Okay? Ace-8, why check raise? Ace-8 does not check raise. Ace-8 calls. You see it very clearly listed here in green. Green hands call. Okay? Here, we're going to be check raising a little bit more often against the button because the button's range is wider, right? Okay, you see all this? Now we're check raising more draws because we have more premium hands and we're against a wider range, right? 39.40, so 39.45. Solver again folds a little bit more than I do, but like I said, I think you want to fold a little bit less than solver in general unless you're against overly aggressive opponents. We'll go through one more spot. 7-4-3. Under gun +1 raises. We call the big blind. 7-4-3. This is where we're really going to get after it. This is a spot where a lot of people bet a little bit too frequently, right? And we also have a load of draws here, and we also have a load of nuts here. So this is a spot where we really are going to be pretty aggressive. We may want to raise a little bit less often than this is with the draws, but you're going to find that this is a board people continuation bet way too often, and we have a lot of nuts. So I like the strategy a lot. Calling all ace high here, this may be a little bit wide, but you're going to find that like ace 6 has a gut shot, right? So it's not like that's all that bad. And ace 8 has overcards. Actually, I'm only continuing with ace 8 backdoor flush draws. So I think that's reasonable. Raising all these low equity draws, which makes sense, right? Are you check raising the jack 10 of spades on 7-4-3? One spade? Answer honestly, answer honestly. If you're not, you're probably playing a little bit too tight. Unless solver disagrees. What's solver do? Jack 10 just calls it. Jack 10 calls the jack 7 of spades. It does not opt to raise it. But whatever, that's fine. Like I said, we are trying to develop implementable strategies, okay? Notice solver raises 20% of the time. Here I was raising 18, so that's good. Roughly same calling percentage, which is good. Is this live? No, actually, well, this is online right now because we are watching on YouTube / Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Google+, Hulu, wherever you're watching this. Take a look at the draws that are raising. 7-4-3, lots of 5x raises, lots of 6x raises. Kind of cool to see 6s and 5s opt to raise some portion of the time too. No, it is a replay. This is not a replay. If you can't tell, this is one of these deep fakes where I am not really a real human, right? Ask around. No one's ever seen me in person besides only a few of you here in the chat. But that was just a hologram. So anyway, these are the hands that are raising. What is surprising about any of this? Nothing really. Gut shots raise, overpairs raise, all logical, right? I have 9s and 8s not raising. Those maybe should be raising. They're not. Sure, you know. All this makes a lot of sense. What about big blind versus button? Big blind versus button, we're going to be raising a lot too. A little bit less, kind of interestingly. I bet we could get away with a few more bluffs here if we felt inclined. Raises less often here, which is kind of cool. You know, the reason the solver's raising less often in this spot compared to against under the gun is because 7-4-3 lines up better with a button raising range than it does against the under the gun range. Because under the gun's a lot of high cards, right? Whereas the button has a lot of low, middle connected cards, which makes sense, right? This is one of these scenarios where the strategy is going to be a little bit different. All right. That's going to be it for today. I know we went through a lot. This was just a small portion of the Tournament Masterclass. We went through, how many slides did we go through today? 30 or 40. The Tournament Masterclass is... Well, just the post-flop section is 700 slides long. 700. We went through about 20 or 30 today. So this is just a small fraction of it. If you like this type of thing, check out pokercoaching.com. Go to pokercoaching.com/premium and you will have full access to the entire 30-something hour long tournament masterclass. We're continuously adding to it. We just went back and added to the bounty section. We updated that. We just added another recent tournament win that I made a deep run in. So check out all of that. Are you going to Hard Rock soon? No, I'm not going to Hard Rock soon. I'm staying at home. USIF, you've been here for a while. First time being live. Good. Glad to hear it. You appreciate the lesson. Good. If you all appreciate the lesson, do me a favor and click the like and subscribe button. This is my show, A Little Brain Fuel. We do it every Monday, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. If you want to check out Brain Fuel, it fuels me, keeps me going all day long. Check that out at BRÈINFUEL.com. Use code POKERCOACHING to get 15% off. I'm telling you, look, you all know I do not recommend much of anything besides Jonathan's poker training products. So hopefully you take that for what it's worth. I'm not someone out here promoting all sorts of random nonsense to try to make a buck. I'm being paid $0 to promote this. I do own a little bit of the company, but I'm being paid $0 to promote this. I like it a lot, and it's helped me. If it helps me, maybe it'll help you. Do you think playing this strategy at 10 cent, 20 cent makes sense? You should pretty much always use roughly the GTO strategy and then adjust to take advantage of whatever your opponents do wrong. Like I just listed, let's go back. Oh, I went to the bottom. Let's see if I can find this real quick. Which spot did I want to show? This spot. This spot. Right here. Beautiful example of where I would play way more aggressively in most scenarios. Because this spot, under the gun +1 raises, big blind calls, flop comes 9-7-5. When I check the big blind, I know most people under the gun +1 continuation bet too often. How do I know? Well, I have loads and loads and loads and loads of data. So I know most people check raise too often. I'm sorry, most people continuation bet too often. If I know they continuation bet too often, I, in turn, need to check raise more often. So I know that in this spot, I'm going to be check raising a lot of the 8s in addition to a lot of the 6s, right? And that's going to result in me kind of running my opponents over. So should you adjust to what your opponents do wrong? Of course you should. But you should roughly know where to start, right? If you don't know where to start, then you're just going to be completely lost. A lot of people out there think you don't need to study anything, that you can just do whatever you want, and it doesn't work that way. Why are there no subtitles on the videos? I don't know how to type all the subtitles on the videos. Is there an easy way to fix this, get subtitles on all the videos? Let me know. Send me an email, support@pokercoaching.com, with any suggestions that you have. If it's an easy fix, I'm happy to do it. How do you get a poker coaching patch? Send us an email, support@pokercoaching.com. We will get it to you. All right, that's me for today. I gotta go. Enjoy yourselves. Have a great, great week. While you're here, go to youtube.com/pokercoaching. Check out some of the recent videos I've been uploading. Let me know what you think. We've been doing a lot of, we've been trying to up the production quality a little bit. I've been going through a make everything pretty phase. And I don't know if anyone actually cares besides me, but I think we're doing a better job putting out higher quality content, and hopefully people appreciate that. If you do, let me know. Click the like and subscribe and the notification bell, and that lets me know. If you don't, go watch somebody else. I will not be offended. I want you to enjoy your life. Have a great day. Thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.